Welcome back to the 40% Better podcast, where we talk about leadership, generally in the context of the technology world, because I live in Silicon Valley and that's what I've been doing for 25 years. Gavin has graciously accepted our invitation to join us. And if you look behind him, for those of you that are watching the video, you'll see that it says Story Business in the background. That's a book he wrote. He's really good at talking about the idea of story. And we're going to be talking about stories in the context of leading and managing people, because it works really well. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So I'm actually reading your book right now, listening to your book, and in the chapter talking about leadership and realizing, oh, wait a minute, I've been telling my people stories since I started running software teams.
Yeah.
Without realizing that it was a valuable thing to do. You know, like I had no clue that it actually, in kind of in retrospect, unconscious competency thing popping up there. Thank you for allowing me to recognize that. I appreciate it.
No, you're very welcome. I think storytelling makes leadership easier if you can get your head around that. It's a way to get people lined up. I think we were just chatting before. The classic kind of, oh, you've just been promoted, or you just got a team, or you're just putting a team together and somehow you're in charge. The classic, I guess the American expression is rookie mistake. The rookie mistake is, you know how to do that job. That's why you got promoted, and you spend all your time telling everyone this is how you do your job. And at some point along the line, you're going to realize that doesn't scale. It may feel good, but it gets very exhausting really quickly. And really, I think the job of leadership and leading teams is, you've just got to get them pointed in roughly the right direction and get them excited about it. The best leadership trick is to make people think that they want to do it anyway, and then just get out of the way. What you should be doing then is like knocking down things that they can't do themselves, and it gets so much easier. And storytelling is just such a useful tool for that, because it just gives people, as I write in the book, it's all about creating shared context so that they have the agency to do the best job they can. And actually, Silicon Valley is full of people that do that really well.
Yeah. Yeah. To frame this, when I built my first software team, I'm a self-taught software engineer, like
Yeah.
books and, online stuff. My first 4 hires were all computer science majors from Berkeley.
Yeah.
Like infinitely better at coding than I was. And the minute that I hired the first one, I realized I can't teach this guy anything. And the best thing I can do is to help him understand the context for what we're doing, the history of what we're doing, and what we're trying to build going forward.
Yeah.
And so that became the game for me, was like just to be able to make sure that then I hired 3 of his friends, that everybody was on board, and all pulling in the same direction, totally switching to the dog sled metaphor. And that in retrospect worked incredibly well. And I did the same thing at every team that I ever ran after that. That was always a thing, because I think I always had people on my teams that were technologically more sophisticated than I was.
Yeah.
And they, like, that's part of the reason they were on my team, is because they were rocket scientists at whatever they were doing.
Yeah.
I just gave them the context to operate in, and then said, okay, how do we design a solution? And that worked really well. And
That's the trick.
yeah,
That's the whole trick of leadership, I think. If I mean, everyone has gone through this. If you think about it, you have days when you're absolutely cooking. Everything is working wonderfully. You're doing great. The day flew by. You had all your best ideas, and it's a Tuesday. And then you have days where you just don't want to get out of bed, and it's, I don't know, a Thursday or a Friday. What you're trying to do, I think, with a team is get more Tuesdays than you have Thursdays. You want them really energized, and I think what people don't get is how much agency is a powerful thing. Because the more people feel like they've got skin in the game, they own it, it's their thing, the more effort they're going to give it. And I think people don't understand what you need to do. But and they go to empowerment, which is a word I absolutely hate. Not that empowerment as a concept is a bad thing. I just feel like empowerment generally becomes such a false promise, because empowerment is, it's really a polite way of asking somebody to do something. I empower you to do this. And especially in big organizations, with, that may have cultures, or cultures that are a little bit more toxic, and empowerment is, I'm asking you to do this, and just you watch. If you mess this up, see how
Oh,
empowered you really are, because I'm going to take that power back in an instant, and you'll get thrown under whichever bus I can find. So I think agency is a huge thing, but the problem with agency is, complete agency is chaos. And what you really want is aligned agency, which is, I wish was a sexier term, but because then I would coin it and put a TM and an R next to it, but it's not, it doesn't sound that exciting. But if you could get people aligned and give them agency, you're really cooking. And the best thing to do the alignment is storytelling and shared context. And like I said, there are so many people, there's so many examples of people that do that well in Silicon Valley. Um, I'll like just a quick example. When I was researching the book, and I was looking, I was always looking, the way it's structured. There's always little stories and vignettes about different companies that are doing things, and I came across Slack and Stuart Butterfield, and I found out that originally it started out as a game company. It was a kind of cute little game that they'd made, and they couldn't get anyone to buy it, and they built their own software internally called Line Feed, and Line Feed was basically a way for them to communicate between some developers in Canada and developers over here in the US. Then they pivoted, you know, fancy word now for, we made a mistake, we're going to change our minds, but we pivoted, and they will make Line Feed into a product, and that became Slack. But the thing that I find really interesting about Stuart Butterfield is, there's a memo that he wrote to his team, which was, "We don't sell saddles." And it was really about trying to give everyone that was on the team, this is probably about, I don't know, 2 or 3 months before their first alpha launch of what was to become Slack. It was really about, like, this is what we're trying to do, and this is why we're trying to do it. And it was all in uh, this metaphor of not selling. We're not just selling features. We're not just building things. And it's a really interesting, you can find it on Slack's website still, I think. "We don't sell saddles" is the original memo, but it's really about creating that shared context and telling a story which really releases people for the agency that everyone loves.
I like that. Yeah, I think a lot and talk a lot about intrinsic motivation.
Yeah.
Same thing you're talking
Yeah.
about, just using different words. Unfortunately, yeah, it's you can't trademark that one because it's common language.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Um, but
Also a bit of a mouthful as well.
it is, and it's I don't know what the shorter version, but which may actually be longer, is having people be happy and trusting at work.
Yeah.
I think that's the for me that's always been the big goal, because my operating hypothesis is that happy people are more productive.
100%.
And yeah, I don't want to say that's a law of nature, but from every place I've ever been, every place I've worked, everything I've seen, the happier people are more productive. And so I keep thinking, how do I make my people happy? Intrinsic motivation, making that happen, setting up an environment for that is
Yeah.
definitely the um so far has been the winning strategy from everything I can tell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I so agree with that. I think if you can find joy and flow in what you do, it doesn't feel like work. It may be work because you get paid for it, but it doesn't feel like it. And that's what I think every human being, if they've experienced that, that's what they want and love at work.
Yeah. 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 I will totally agree with that. Yeah. That's kind of the magic. Um, and I think part of that is part of the way that you get to that is having an organization that says, okay, so Gavin, what do you want to be doing?
Yeah,
How do you want your career to go? And, you know, I don't have skin in the game of you staying on the track that you're in right now.
right.
You know, yeah, you know, you've been doing this for 5 years. Do you still want to keep doing it, or do you want to do something different? You
Yeah,
know, what's the up step? Remember, maybe it's 2 years, maybe it's 5 months. I don't know. Yeah. But that way you get to create your own story about where you want to go and how you want it to work.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But
It's a it's a key part of leadership. We talked about this is really about leadership and how does leadership and storytelling intersect. And for me, um, leadership is very much about the choices you make, whether you're a small L leader or a big L leader, whether you're deciding that you're going to pivot the company because, hey, maybe we didn't get that right. Which, like, the best pivot I heard recently is the Allbirds pivot from sneakers to AI infrastructure. That was
I
a classic.
yeah, I heard about
But
that and I'm like, wow, that's going to be a business school case study.
yeah,
E- e- wh- Whether it fails or not, right? That
yeah,
story people are going to be talking about for a while.
I feel like that's going to be one of those things where the trailer was awesome, but the movie was not so great. So yeah, I feel yeah. So with leadership, you're making these choices, big, small, really strategic, tactical. And even as a person leading a team or on a team, you're making a choice to have that difficult conversation or to do whatever. It's all about making choices. And I think storytelling is what amplifies those choices. How are people going to think? How do you align groups of people when you're not there? Whether those groups of people are customers, potential customers, engineers on your team, whoever it is, it's about lining people up. And storytelling is really one of the biggest. Well, someone told me this after I've written the book. I wish I'd heard it before, but it's one of the oldest technologies, really, for doing that, for helping people line up.
Yeah, yeah. Um, in terms of like someone who's not used to telling stories, you know, they're running teams.
Yeah.
What's a good like structure and way to approach telling stories for your team so that they like it?
Yeah. Well, that is a long there's a long answer to that question, longer than this podcast, will run, but there's a couple of short and easy answers. I think, first of all, let's talk about the learning side of it. How do you learn? The assumption there is that I don't normally do that, I'm not good at that, therefore, I wanna get better at it. Um, I think I think that's a story you tell yourself, first of all, that you're not good at stories, because everyone they are the way humans communicate. Whether your stories are entertaining, whether they get a laugh, whether they get give people a bit of a snooze, that's different. But everyone can tell stories instinctively, and you did it when you were 4 or 5 years old. Now, I can remember when my son came back from school one day, and he was maybe 5 or 6, and he would tell a story, and it was and then something happened, and then something happened, and then something. And I was literally going through minute by minute of the day. And I love him, but I didn't really want to listen to that story. So, so what you've got to think about is a couple of things. Stories at their base are a piece of information wrapped in emotion. So if you're just giving people information, you're not telling a story. You've got to somehow wrap it in emotion. And to understand the emotion side of things, you've got to understand where people are. I talk about this in the book. I call it the motive triangle. people, when they go into business, they somehow think it's all rational. I've got to have an ROI. I've got to have a use case. I've got to have um, a reason to do this thing. It- Numbers and dollars and finance all come into it. And I just don't think that's the way people make decisions. People make decisions in a very emotional way. What humans are good at doing is rationalizing, but we're not very rational. And so you've got to think about hope and fear. So the three sides of the motive triangle are hope, fear, and reason. Hope is what you want people to go towards, and that's a longer term pull. It gives you that intrinsic motivation because people hope, they see themselves in the picture, they can understand how they're going to be part of it. Fear is something they want to run away from, avoid at all costs. And then reason is also equally important because no one ever makes a decision. They may make the decision at the hope and fear level, but they need to explain it to somebody else. And they're never going to tell you what their secret wish is, their hope. They're not really going to tell you they're scared, but they're going to give you a logical reason. So you could think about that in software sales, even. Why are you buying? Well, it's hope and fear, but I have to explain it to the CFO. So that's the reason piece that I need to get a handle on. And so storytelling, for me, revolves around that. It revolves around the idea that it's all about the audience, the person I'm speaking to. They are the hero of the story. They have to be in it, and I have to kind of paint this picture of hope, fear, and reason. So it's like I said, it was a short.
No,
That's
I
the
really
short version of a much
okay,
longer
I
answer.
really like that. I really like that because, um, I'm gonna have to steal your triangle.
You're
Um,
very welcome to it.
yeah,
It's a free triangle.
it's a free triangle, right? It's not registered or trademarked yet. Thank you. That's very good. Um, because I tend to think of, um I totally love them, make them the hero of the story, but I tend to think about when I'm talking with other people at work, I'm always thinking what's their success metrics,
Yeah,
which in your triangle is their hope and their fear, right? They're hoping something and they're, you know, afraid that blah, blah, blah doesn't happen, right? And so, um, especially when I'm talking up the org chart, um, I'm, I'm always thinking about the what do they want? What's their hope? And what are they afraid of? And framing like starting with that to begin with. Um, and then giving the logic argument. And I don't know where I learned that. Um,
it's funny. This is the second time we've had this part of this conversation because here's the best review I ever got of the book. Well, I will call it the second best review. I gave an advance copy. I didn't give an advance copy. I got my sister to buy it and then said you should read this book. And I said, what do you think? And she said something like, yeah, it was actually pretty. She's English, so this is going to be high praise. It was actually not bad. Was the that's to translate to the American audience, that was amazing. That's the best book I've ever read. That's how an English person would. It wasn't bad. She said it was. I didn't learn anything new, but I'd never heard it, put in that way before. So I was okay with that. There's nothing really new, but you've never really heard it this way.
right. Well, so for me, the ahas, like I'm totally happy when I get an aha that I'm like, oh, I've already been doing something. I just
Uh,
took it for granted. And
yeah,
the problem with taking it for granted is I can't teach somebody else.
that's true.
Right.
Yeah,
And I always think like part of what I think in terms of leadership is knowledge transfer. Like I need to be able to people on my team want to become team leads. I need to be able to coach them and train them in all the kinds of things that I know so
yeah.
that they can start to experiment. And in the beautiful thing about the book is there's stuff that you're talking about there that I in retrospect can go, oh, I've been doing this, but number one, I didn't think it meant anything.
Yeah.
Um, I didn't realize that it was a valuable behavior. And because of that, like I've never thought about teaching that to anybody.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, oh, that actually matters. Like
Yeah.
the way that structure works and the language and that triangle that you're talking about, I'm like, oh, that's actually a really good way to explain this communication with other people. Because I'm a giant fan of networking at work,
Mm.
or outside of work, because there's so much to learn about the business and how you can contribute to the business. And if you're looking at having a leadership role, then the more of that data you have, the better it is.
Yeah.
And that
I think
yeah,
there's no question the best leaders, the best people leaders are great teachers because they are very invested in the success of the people around them, but they're also really very good at explaining how or giving people like tips or tricks
yeah,
into how do they get better. Because there's no one that doesn't want to get better at what they do. They might resist being told. That's a whole different conundrum, but everyone wants to get better.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that I think that's only it's the I think everybody wants to have a growth mindset,
Hmm.
even if it's
Even if they already think they've got one and they don't.
like, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, it's how do you step into that uncomfortable space and say, oh yeah, I'm a total beginner at this and I suck,
Yeah.
and that's okay.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the fascinating part. Um, Thank you for that outline. That was really good.
No, you're welcome.
And it didn't take the whole podcast, so that's a, double win there. I'm really pleased about that. Um, how did you get started thinking about storytelling? Have you written
Uh,
all these books behind you? Is that the deal? You're like,
no, no, I wish. So I'm originally an engineer, a mechanical engineer, and I did that because my dad was an engineer. And when we got to the time to have the college talk, there was basically I didn't have much say in that conversation, and it was like you should do engineering because you'll never want for a job, which is probably true at the time. I'm not sure. I'm not sure it would. But the yeah, so I think if you're an engineer, you and I write about this in the book, you kind of break down the world into kind of ones and zeros or atoms. There's a very scientific, this is the way it is, and this is the truth. And it's very absolutist and it's very much built on this basis of meritocracy. I mean, I love working with engineers. In our work, we do a ton of transformation and change work with big companies, and it's always fun working with engineers because they always want to build things, they always want to tear things down, they're always curious about how things work. But it's a very kind of meritorious institution, if that's the right way of saying it, because engineers just basically believe if I do the right thing, if I have a better way, that's going to work. And and what I think people have stumbled a few times get is that that's not always the truth. So you know, your parents essentially lied to you. You know, when they told you that it's all going to be okay and it'll all work out if you just try hard. Engineers believe that and they get into that. So anyway, why did I end up writing this book? I think I started out with a lot of ideas about why are people making those decisions? Why would you choose option A instead of option B? That doesn't seem to make sense. And there's a whole social and political dynamic around choosing option A, which was clearly not the best idea or not the best way of doing things. But that's what happened. And you see it all the time in these classic case studies. Why did why did Kodak invent digital photography and yet not do anything with it? That seems odd. Why would Facebook invent or I guess I get why they invested in Oculus and 3D, but why would they change their whole company to Meta and go around pitching the metaverse when they had something completely? It's easy to look at these decisions in hindsight and say that seems strange, but I'm fascinated about how both people and organizations make decisions, and I think most of it is in the packaging of the decision. So if you're an engineer, if you have an idea, then you need to get really, really good. If you think your idea is good, you need to get really good at packaging it. And that to me is what storytelling is. And that's what led me into this kind of fascination with it. And then writing the book just became an exercise in trying to get all this stuff straight in my head and commit it to paper. So my first audience was really for myself and trying to make sense of all the random thoughts I had fluttering around.
Like that. That's a good explanation. Okay, what are you gonna write next?
I am working on something around. I have two more kind of on my list. One is about change and it's really about, it started out actually as a chapter I cut from Story Business, which is called, originally the working title was Six Storytellers, and it's about types of the different affinities we have for the way we tell stories, but it's really morphed into something about change and how organizations struggle with change and how to kind of work through that. And then the one after that is probably going to be about how do we translate strategy through an organization. And then I'm done.
Hmm. Okay. You realize
Then I'm moving on to novels, maybe science fiction, maybe crime.
okay.
I don't know. I'm done working put it that way.
Clearly, you like the writing more than the mechanical engineering now.
Oh yeah. I mean, I haven't. I mean, I started out in nuclear submarines and sports cars. I haven't like built a bridge or turned a nut or done a drawing for 40 years, 30 years. I can't
What
remember. It's a
what were
long
you doing in
time.
race cars?
So I worked my very so I did mechanical engineering at the University of Central Lancashire, and the car. I had a kind of year out from university, and I worked for a company called TVR, which is
Oh, I know them.
local. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So I
yeah, they're
worked.
sweet cars.
Well, so this is maybe one of the places where I was like, what? Maybe it's the best packaged idea. So they the traditional TVR. This is in the early. This would be the late '80s. The traditional TVR was a very wedge shaped car, like a Lotus
Mhm.
Esprit type looking car. And the guy that owned the company, Peter Wheeler, he had me and this other intern, and he basically said, "We've got to do this something for the Birmingham Motor Show, and work with this other guy." So this other guy who knew how to make fiberglass and molds and things like that. Work with this other guy. I have an idea for something, and he basically had the idea for something that looked like an AC Cobra. That's kind of what it looked like. And he said, we've got this chassis, we've got this engine, put this body on it." That's basically what we're doing, is putting a body on it. We spent all summer making this thing, and they took it to the Birmingham Motor Show, which is the big motor show in the UK, and they sprayed it up. It looked fantastic. It was basically a whole load of it wasn't running. It was fiberglass. It was body filler, and it was all sorts of. They had to push it everywhere. It weighed a ton. No one had actually designed this thing. It was two students in a garage making this thing, with Peter Wheeler coming in every so often saying, "I don't like the way you did that. Do it this way." And so, but it got there. It was called. He called it. I think he called it the S class or the S type. I can't remember exactly. People loved it because it was this kind of retro. It hit a zeitgeist at the time. It was very retro because it was harking back to the '60s, and it was kind of an E-type Jaguar shape, AC Cobra shape, and people loved it. And they, because Peter Wheeler was a salesman, they just started taking orders for this thing that they had no idea how to build,
That's
when they
awesome.
could make it, or anything else. It was all about packaging, and they sold them like hotcakes. So yeah, that was probably my first. Looking back, that was probably the first clue that maybe it's how you package the idea, not the actual.
Yeah.
They hadn't even driven. They didn't even have a working prototype. They just had something that looked good.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my god, that's so funny. That is awesome. I love hearing stories like that, people like It's just a rolling chassis. There's like, and
Yeah,
nothing
that's all it
actually
was.
works, and that's it. Yeah, that's too funny. Oh my god.
Half a ton of body filler and a rolling chassis is what it
Right,
was.
right. Yeah. Well, if it's any consolation nowadays, guys are 3D printing their bodies.
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah,
and I just saw sorry, I'm totally a car geek. I just saw a video of a guy who's he's building a single seater open wheel formula car.
yeah.
Not for any particular racing class. I think he's going to use it for hill climbs and track days. But he came up with he thought that the uh, the way that sway bars are built is um, not good enough,
Mhm.
and he now has a sway bar that is actually a shock absorber with a spring on it.
Yeah,
So it's got like variable rates and stuff and valving. And that he designed, built the whole thing himself. A bunch of it's 3D printed, off the shelf Heim joints on the end.
yeah.
And I was like, that's such a that's such a crazy idea. Um, and yeah, he was like, oh yeah, I 3D printed the shaft and I 3D printed the body, and we machined the valves. And I'm like, 3D printed like most of the damn thing. Yeah, it's cool.
Well, and I know you don't want to turn this into a podcast about cars, but if you ever come across a first generation S class TVR, because I worked on one side of the car and another student was working on the other, the passenger door of one side is shorter by about 4 inches than the other side because we were working on different.
It's hilarious.
Well, she couldn't see because you're only looking at one side of the car or the other. And so you go in and we cast the first production ones were cast off the display car, the show car that we made for Birmingham. So we never fixed that. If you go in
That
with
is
a tape measure,
funny.
you'll see that's an original.
Okay, I'll know that then. I'll be like, and I know the guy that designed this.
Yeah.
It's his fault. It's
Yeah,
all
yeah.
Gavin's fault. Oh my god. Okay, now I'm gonna have to go hunt one down.
That's probably why I left engineering. I had a whole bunch of stories of bad things that I did as an engineer. So
As an
I
engineer,
felt
okay,
this. It's
okay.
not really good.
If it's if it's any consolation at all, have you ever worked on early Lamborghinis?
No.
Okay, I used to work on those. That was my first job out of college. Was
Yeah.
wrenching on Ferraris and Lamborghinis. Um, the Mura, which everybody talks about loving the body shape.
Yeah, yeah.
They're like everybody's like, oh my god, the Muras, they're beautiful. I've worked on multiples of them. Um, if you ever have one up in the air and you look at the bottom of the frame, it's just welded together sheet metal.
Yeah.
And it's number one, really ugly welds. Number two, it's super flexy.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is horrible. What were they thinking? And it's designed to look good, right? The other problem with them is, and this is not supposed to be an automotive focused podcast, but we're going down the road. Um, the casting of the aluminum for the block and the oil pan was
Yeah.
so porous that
Yeah.
oil would weep through the aluminum.
Yeah.
And so their fix was they painted the insides.
Yeah.
That's the sealant. Crazy.
Off the record after this podcast, Bill, I'll tell you about a couple of other things about early that generation of TVR that when I was there because it was one of the reasons I went because I went from TVR to the defense industry. So I went from sports cars to submarines, and one of the reasons I did was TVR was such a small company. So I felt like it was a bit of a wild west, and I want to work for a proper grown-up company. So I went to the defense industry, where so literally I went from a company where in a summer you could make a whole new product in a car to it you design a bolt, it takes you 3 months to design a bolt, and then it's 4 years before that bolt goes into production because that's the difference in the
Yeah, in the
the
scale, yeah.
industry. Yeah.
That's too funny. How long did you stay in submarines?
Well, it was Vickers Shipbuilding and Engineering. So I started out in on the submarine side when I graduated. I was a graduate apprentice worked in the shipyard. I worked in the the design department of the I worked on the design of the next generation submarines, nuclear submarines, and then I worked in quality for a bit, and then I ended up moving to armaments design, and I worked on the AS-90, which is a self-propelled artillery, which, you know, full turnaround. You now see them on the front lines in Ukraine because the British Army has got rid of all their AS-90s and given them to the Ukrainians. I can literally on TV see bits that I designed in
Nice.
on these things. Yeah,
That's very that's it's such an interesting, like, connect the dots kind of a thing, you know? Like, that's funny. Mechanical eng I know nothing about mechanical engineering, um, and, other than, like, there's a case that someone had designed that's on my phone, you know?
yeah,
And I'm sure it didn't take 4 years for that to hit production. Is
yeah. No, not now. Not now.
Yeah,
Not the way
not
things
nowadays.
are built now.
That is very cool. Any other thoughts about storytelling for team leads?
For team leads, I would say, well, one of the things I write about in the book is about product. I talk about different genres of storytelling because I think most people would think about storytelling as that's marketing's problem. I break it down into yes, there is storytelling for marketers, brand storytelling. I break it down into these six different genres. Value storytelling, which is how are you creating worth, or how are you get whatever it is you're making as a company. Why do people want to invest in that thing? Product storytelling, which I think is the real kind of beating heart of all this. You have to build something, and how do you get people excited about that build, and what are you building, whether buying it. I'll come back to that's, I think, is the one that really team leads would be interested in. Brand storytelling obviously is how do you build a brand around that set of products that you're building. Then you get into sales storytelling, the kind of one-on-one that gets your first one sold and the second one sold, then leadership storytelling, and finally culture storytelling. So I explain these six genres. They're the last six or so chapters in the book, and they all have the same tenets of storytelling and those same tools, but it's like a genre. It's the same. You know, if you watch a horror movie or you watch a science fiction movie, there's the same plot devices. It's just a different applied to a different setting. So
Right,
I think
right.
one of the rules that I think there's a couple of rules in product storytelling that I find over and over again because I talk to product teams that they are fascinated by. One of them is this idea of using old words to describe new things, and the other one is to build stories for um, create stories for builders, backers, builders, and buyers. So the backer is obviously the person that's investing in whatever you are doing. That could be your boss, that could be the CEO, that could be a VC, it could be anything, but it's a slightly different story. The
Right, right.
the story for a builder is you want to give them just that's that aligned agency. You want to give them just enough that they can pour their heart and soul into your pet project as well as, you know, it's not just your heart and soul, it's theirs as well. So how do I create a story for them? And then the buyer obviously is different. And each time you're kind of focusing on a slightly different thing. The backer is more interested in, am I going to get my money back? Do I trust the team that's doing this? Do you have credibility to pull off what you say you want to do? Which is a very different story from getting a bunch of engineers excited about building a widget and getting them to create the world's best widget. And then the very first buyer is obviously going to be interested because it's new, but how do you get them excited? So that's a piece of storytelling that I find interesting, the product storytelling. And the other rule on that is the idea of old words to describe new things. That I think is a classic mistake that engineers make over and over again, where you are so in love with the thing that you are building, You use all
Mm,
the words that you have to describe it, and you can't get past the fact that, "No, no, no, this is exactly what it is and how we're not calling it anything else, it's this." So I found in researching the book, I found this, uh, do you know, talking of cars, you might actually know the answer to this. Do you know when the first commercially available electric vehicle was sold in the US?
I'm gonna say like the 1930s,
Close. It was like the 1890s or something.
1890s. Oh my God. Okay, even
So the
earlier.
Yeah, so the first electric vehicle was actually out around the same time, commercially available in the US, was around the same time as a petrol driven, as a Mercedes or the very first cars. What was interesting is that vehicle, and you can go and look it up in archives and museums, it was called an electrobat. Now, as a 21st century person, you can understand why the electric vehicle was called an electrobat because it has electricity, I guess, and because it has batteries, I assume. So whoever invented it called it an electrobat. Can you imagine being the inventor of this amazing thing called an electrobat and then trying to tell people, I've got this electrobat? Meanwhile, your competition down the road is saying, it's a horseless carriage. That's what I've got. And
Right,
so
right.
that's the simplicity of using old words to describe new things. And I think you see, blockchain. If you've ever had someone try to explain blockchain to you, you know that no one's ever quite cracked the code on that one. There'll be people that are really into blockchain that can explain it to each other, but they cannot explain it to a wider audience. 5G, they can all explain it to each other, but they cannot explain it to a wider audience. The best marketing move of the last 10 years, in my opinion, is whichever genius called ChatGPT, because they took something very arcane that no one understands, GPT, and put chat in front of it, which everyone understands. So I think this idea of using old words to describe new things is a pivotal act of product storytelling.
Like that. Okay, I got to figure out how to incorporate that in my own world. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome. You have great advice. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
No, you're very
Yeah,
welcome.
yeah. It's no, it's phenomenally good. Yeah, it's. I think, and the reason we're doing this is I think that storytelling, when you're, I think storytelling at an executive level is much better understood and much better um, recognized for its value than it
Hmm.
is when you get down to the team lead level.
Yeah.
And the more that I think about it, the more I think, oh, maybe the reason that my teams consistently work so well is because I kept telling them stories about the reasoning behind why we needed to go build something. Um, and so that was the big buy-in factor because I recognized that other team leads didn't do that.
Yeah.
And so, and I'm always thinking about like what's the differentiators, like why does this work and this doesn't work? And that's yeah, I think that's one of those big ones that I just wasn't even thinking about really as a standout strategy. Yeah,
Well,
good.
I think all work comes down to people. Any
Yeah.
any any company of any size, you could have, you know, 2 people in a garage or 3 people in a garage to a Fortune 50 of 50,000 people. You're gonna be making the 2 people in the garage and the 50,000 people are going to be making decisions, big and small, every day. When there are 2 people in the garage, it's pretty easy because you can talk to each other all the time, but, you know, I worked in a garage in a whole summer with a friend of mine creating this car, and we didn't manage to talk to each other about the size of the door.
Yeah.
So you still get these problems. 50,000 people, imagine how many people you have to talk to get everyone lined up. It's an impossible task. But these decisions that everyone is making, those big and small decisions, are either net creating value for your company or they're destroying value. And it could be as little as, you kind of pissed somebody off in something you said, and they ended up, you know, being a little bit narky with somebody on the phone, and that person didn't end up buying something, or they went away. It's those kind of things, or it's the really big things about, should we should we stop doing sneakers and go into AI infrastructure? It's those kind of decisions that happen all the time. And I think what most people don't get is people make those decisions. And the best tool you have for any kind of human engineering is storytelling. And so I think it's harder for the kind of engineering mind to get that, because we live in such a black and white world where that's not true. But it really is true, because the net is you're going to come up against a bunch of people, and you have to get them moving in the direction you want to move them in.
I like it. Yeah, it's always about moving people in the direction you want them to go. This has been awesome. Thank you a ton. This has been very cool. All of Gavin's contact info will be in the show notes for anybody that wants to find him, get his book. His book is amazing. Almost done with it right now. So, yeah, I'm a huge fan. Thank you so much.